the Start Your Own Business podcast. Hear inspiring startup stories and get reliable expert advice on how to start your business and get off to the best possible start. Brought to you by Startup Donut, helping small businesses succeed.
Hi there, thanks for joining us. You're listening to the Start Your Own Business podcast. My name's Fiona and I'm your host. There's something like 5.6 million small businesses here in the UK, and it's no surprise to hear that many of those business founders have decided to run their business as a partnership, working with one or more business partners. Working as a partnership can have a number of advantages. For one, you've got someone to share the decision-making and workload with, but that's not to say it's all hunky-dory. Sometimes business partnerships go wrong, and that can have disastrous consequences. So, what's the key to getting it right? Today, we speak to Peter Harrington. He started his business, SimVenture, with his brother Paul more than 20 years ago. So he's going to share his top tips and advice. But before we meet Peter, let's find out more about the sponsor of this episode, Sage, and how Copilot can help you start and run your business.
To be honest, work had been a slog. I'm a designer, but some nights I was chasing invoices like my full-time job. Now Sage Copilot chases my invoices for me. I just need to click a button and it's done. And I get paid 1 week faster.
Sage Copilot is built with over 40 years of experience helping real businesses like Sophia at Solver Design. That's more than artificial intelligence, that's authentic intelligence. Search Sage Copilot to learn more. Working with 21 customers, each round payments came in 7 days faster with Sage Copilot. T's and C's apply.
It's now time to meet our guest, Peter Harrington. Peter is the co-founder of SimVenture. Hi, Peter. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Fiona. Lovely to be here.
Before we start to talk about business partnerships, I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about what you were up to before you founded SimVenture.
Yeah, so SimVenture was founded in 2004, but I actually started my first business straight out of graduation in 1989 and started others in the late 90s. And so I developed a business called QA Research, and that was very much in the sort of social research arena, but also there was a design and marketing company, and also created a print business in 2002, which was an interesting experience given the challenge of the digital world in later years. But yeah, so I've always been someone who starts and runs their own business.
So what can you tell us about SimVenture? What do you sell and who are your customers?
So SimVenture addresses the problem of allowing people to experience what it's like to run a business using online learning tools without the risk of actually running a business, because we believe people learn best when they're given authentic learning opportunities. And just like a pilot learns how to fly a plane using a flight simulator, we've developed business simulators for people who want to start and run a company. And we've also developed business validation platforms to help people validate their ideas. And the people we work with around the world, a lot of education institutions, particularly universities, but also we work with large corporate organizations and banks and financial institutions. But we also work with colleges and schools as well.
Okay. So you started SimVenture, I think something like 20 years ago now, with your brother Paul. Why did you decide to start a business as a partnership rather than setting it up on your own? Were you always intending to run a business with Paul?
It's a really good question. It wasn't always intending, but I think the great thing about self-employment is it teaches you who you are and why you're here on planet Earth. And I had discovered that my real interest in life is developing the talent that other people have. And I discovered this through the first business and just getting huge joy seeing people arrive and grow and flourish and maybe go on to get other jobs elsewhere. But I also realized that if you're going to start a business, it has to start with you address a problem. And I discovered sort of around turn of the century that there was a real problem, and there still is, in the way that we actually typically train startup businesses, and that we often put them in a room and tell them things, and we assume they're learning when actually they're not. And I really wanted to address this because starting and running a business, as everyone knows, it's a risk pursuit. So just like flying a plane, we need to allow people to make decisions and see the consequences and discover their flawed assumptions. So this was always going to be a technical solution. And anyone who knows me knows I have very little technical knowledge, even though I'm CEO of an ed tech company. And the person, it just so happened, this was amazing, really. My brother worked in car simulators. Then he'd developed technology that helped cars to drive themselves, and he worked with other simulations. And so when he was made redundant in the web crash of about 2001, 2002, he was available, and I was putting it to him. And eventually I just said, Paul, look, I need you to help build this. Will you do it? And he did, and he spent 4 years building it, and I was doing all the research in the background. I just didn't realize he was going to make such a good job of our first ever product that we ultimately launched in 2006.
So it was a sort of serendipity rather than a kind of planned, approach to starting a business as a partnership.
Yes, I think you're spot on. It was serendipity. And I think if Paul was here, he would agree with me. We're not the most ideal business partners. I don't know what ideal is, but we've really made it work. And I think one of the key reasons is that when you're going particularly into education technology, or you're trying to make a difference to people's lives, doing something like that really matters. It's not like we're making chairs and tables. Not that I'm decrying people who do that. But, we want to help people learn in a different and better way so they can acquire knowledge which will help them with their lives. And so when there's a real passionate vision that we both share to do that, he comes from the technology side, I bring the experience and the bruises that people have felt from, startup failure, and really wanting to help people train better and learn better.
So sounds like he kind of fills a gap that you had in your own skills and knowledge, and that's why, it was good to bring him in.
Absolutely essential. Without Paul, this business would not exist. And I had no idea about the quality of his coding. And I mean, he was a software developer who learned electronic engineering at Surrey University, 82 to 86. And this was very much the early days of computer software engineering. And, so he's really got honed skills. And without Paul, there is absolutely no way that, A, we could have built the product. But the second thing here is that whilst he was building it, I was talking to potential customers and getting feedback. And in those days, there were only probably 5 business simulations on the market globally. And so we knew what we had to be better than. And getting that feedback, understanding the competitor situation, Paul's ability meant that when we brought the first product out in 2006, the pull we had from customers was fantastic. And it validated all the work we'd done.
So you could clearly see that Paul had skills that you needed to add to the business. But did you have any reservations about working closely in business with your brother?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to think very carefully because I think one of the interesting things about working with family is that you've been brought up together, so you know each other's values. And I think that's probably the foundation start is what are the values you bring, in terms of honesty, integrity, and then there's the vision. I think, though, as we learned fairly early on, though, there are certain things that we see differently, and we can argue and argued from a very early stage about stuff. I mean, a couple of examples was we have a different attitude to risk. And my attitude is based on many years of running businesses and coping with fairly stressful situations, which Paul is less attuned to. He's less risk. He's more risk averse, and so we will see things differently. I think the other side is that we are different people, and we will approach subjects and we will use words and language in different ways. And he lives in Surrey. I live in York. And so we're not sitting next to each other at a desk each day. And it's really interesting how conversations online can get quite heated quite quickly because you can't necessarily decode what the other person is saying.
Yeah. So how do you manage those kinds of differences of opinion?
That's a great question. And a mentor of mine when I was 23 and had just graduated, and I was about to start. And Frank was a great guy, and he wrote me the letter, and it sticks with me to this day because there were so many gems in there. But one of them was this, and he said, "Look, Peter, you have to understand that two people of absolute integrity can see different truths in the same set of circumstances." And I've never doubted Paul's integrity at all. He's an extremely honest person, and it's just very, very important, even though you may be even shouting at one another, that, hang on a minute, if this person believes as passionately does about such and such should be on a particular part of such a product, or, the way we approach the customer has got to be different, then, it's worth tuning into. And there have been countless occasions when actually, okay, fine, we'll go away. And then 24 hours later, after a bit of reflection, you realise that, what a surprise, I'm not as right as I thought I was.
I guess the thing as well when you're working with family is that, unless you take that time to step away and reflect, it's very easy to sort of become entrenched in your opinion. And also they know from the whole of their life experience of how to kind of push your buttons. So I think it's about kind of, like you say, stepping away, reflecting and trying to understand where they're coming from.
Yes, and I think that building this in without being overly formal about it is really important. I remember because I'm very much on the customer side and always have been, and that's meant in this business I've done a huge amount of traveling around the world. And I remember I was in South Africa, and I had gone back to the accommodation, which it wasn't a great hotel because we could only afford the bare basics, certainly back in 2010 it was. And he wanted to talk to me on a Sunday evening, but the bandwidth from that particular accommodation wouldn't allow us to see each other. In fact, I don't think we could even talk to each other. So all we could do was type. And it was amazing. And we actually started even typing to each other saying, "This is great. You know what? By slowing us down, I really understand what you're saying. And this is much more convivial than, the sort of the audio or audio visual, whereby you're so quick to judge or get to points where you fire off and then you lose it. But the conversation suddenly becomes highly emotional rather than focusing on what you were talking about. And that typing out that conversation, it became enjoyable. And that taught me a lot. But I think the thing about working in partnership is that partnerships do fail ultimately, or they can fail. But partnerships, like any other relationship, are also always subject to micro fails all the time. Now, the micro fails don't cause the absolute failure, but unless you address them, they do. Yeah. And it's about accepting you're going to get micro fails, and you're going to say the wrong thing, and you're going to miss something or not do something you said, or maybe someone takes something as a bit of dishonesty. But it's then addressing that and, go, yeah, hands up, I'm sorry, got that wrong, and okay, let's move on. And making sure that you get closure on the micro fails, because doing that actually helps you grow the relationship rather than let it fail.
Yeah. You mentioned you were talking about when you were out in South Africa, but you also mentioned that you and Paul are at other ends of the country. Does that add extra complication to your, how you manage your partnership arrangement?
I think it does. And what also adds complication is the fact that Paul will openly say he's an evening person and I'm a morning person. Always has been true.
Right.
So I'll be up working, as early as 6:30 in the morning, but by 4:30, 5 o'clock, I'm keeling over. But he starts at I'll phone him. If I phone him at 8:45, he'll be in bed. But typically he's getting going by 9:15, 9:30. But he's sometimes, he's working till 2 in the morning. But of course, for our international customers who might happen to make a tech inquiry, from, I don't know, Mexico, where we do a lot of work, they get someone talking to them on the phone. Not that, most of our stuff isn't on the phone these days. But, we are different people in many ways. But, it has its disadvantages and advantages. But in terms of being at other ends of the country, Paul's type 1 diabetic as well, and he's got to be careful about travelling. Only the other day we were in Edinburgh together, and suddenly he found himself, he had an eye bleed, and he's 61.
Right.
And he's a long way from home, and that's terrifying. Now, I don't understand what that's like. I just know what he's telling me. Whereas, so he really likes home. He's a home bird. He likes order. Whereas I'm much more, I mean, I've spent a lot of my life hitchhiking. I love uncertainty. So we are very different and we approach things differently, but it works together pretty well.
So do you have any tips for managing those kind of differences in approach?
Yeah, I think, first of all, is look to yourself. The problem is if there's a problem between you and one other person, half of it is yours. And I think sitting down and trying to sort of, rather than sort of stand your ground and say, well, this is it, is actually trying to investigate what's going on and ask a few questions and listen. I think the other thing is that we were the two founding directors together in 2006 when we launched the first product. But by 2010, we'd got a third person who was a director and joined the company. And if you take a football analogy, it was a bit like we had a goalkeeper and we had someone who was scoring goals. You know, I was scoring goals, Paul was the goalkeeper. And we desperately needed someone in midfield. And Paul played a vital role in tuning in, listening in, bringing us together, banging our heads together sometimes, and just being an essential bit of, oil in the system. And, he's been with us ever since he joined us. And I think my advice is don't try, battling out head to head. You waste so much time and you're not looking at the bigger picture. And having a third person who you both value, really, really helps.
So when you bring the third director in, do you sit down, the three of you, and have a frank conversation about whose role was what and how you're going to deal with disagreements when they come along? Because inevitably there will be things that you don't agree on. So how did you formulate that?
No, we haven't formulated that, and I kind of think that's because of the people we are. So I'm not saying you shouldn't, and I think that one of the pieces of advice I would give, if people are getting together and forming a partnership right at the beginning, sitting down and openly sharing, look, what are our values and what's the vision, and also trying to explore, what happens if this situation arises, what happens if that situation arises.
Yeah.
I think that's really healthy, because as we know, businesses go through lows and they go through highs, and people behave differently in different situations. And I don't think I'm a great fan of saying, right, we must have a meeting now about how we're going to address X, Y, Z. What I am a great fan of in this world of where we work online is actually getting people together. And so we can break bread and talk and see each other. And especially when there are three people there with us as directors, we have the ability to be very frank with one another and then go for a beer. Which I appreciate is very British male, but that's, we're not falling out with it. No, I've got no truck or history with my brother or the third director because we've dealt with the issues. And I think my advice is you've got to deal with them. Don't let things, that need to be dealt with sit there because it'll poison the business.
Yeah, can fester.
And fester, yeah, dead right.
Yeah. Would it also be fair to say that what you're the kind of scratching beneath the surface of that is that you need to be very clear about separating business and non-business, particularly when you're working with family members? Like you say, you go after, you thrash out the problem and then go to the pub and the problem doesn't come with you, so that you can kind of protect your non-business relationship with your partner.
Yeah, I mean, interesting, at 5 to 5 I got a call. Oh, no, I had to phone Paul at 5 to 5 last night and said, oh, by the way, with regards to this project, we're doing a big piece of work with the Open University at the moment. With regards to this project, X, Y, and Z. And he was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to check in on this. And it was, oh, and before you go, Pete, just want to mention, and he wanted to talk about Christmas arrangements because we will meet his family at some point in Christmas. And I was like, Paul, I don't want to talk about Christmas arrangements. It's 5 to 5. I've been up since. You're an evening person. I'm a morning person. Let's do it another time. Whereas I suppose if it wasn't my brother, I couldn't necessarily be that frank. But at the same time, it's very easy when people are that frank, for 24 hours or overnight to get the hump a bit. And
Yeah.
this is what happens on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So when things do go wrong, it can have quite disastrous consequences for a business, and lots of small businesses kind of operate on a knife edge a lot of the time anyway, because of the nature of the economy and how things are at the moment. But if you have a disagreement, that could be terminal for a business. Can you give us any examples of where you've seen that happening without sort of dobbing anybody in?
Do you want to talk? Do you want me to talk about our business?
If you're happy to talk about your business or other businesses, where you've seen that happen, where a partner has fallen out with another partner and it's spelled the end of a business, or.
There's a particularly good one that springs to mind, because I was asked to advise this company when I think it launched around 2014, and without giving anything away, so I'm just going to talk about the situation rather than the industry and the people, because it's quite sensitive. But I'd actually said to these people at the beginning, look, make sure if you're going to work together as a three that you're really clear about your values and your vision, and be honest with each other if you're going to start this together. And they did that. But one of the things that they didn't do was to put together a shareholder agreement. It was a limited company, but for whatever reason, they didn't choose a shareholder agreement. Anyway, fast forward a few years, business is incredibly successful. It's making hundreds of thousands of pounds net profit. And it's so successful that one of them, who happens to be the financial controller, is stealing money from the business. And they do a little bit of investigation. And I got a call. I happened to be in Singapore at the time, from one of the other directors saying, Pete, this is going on. What do we do? And anyway, I said, well, first of all, you've got to be absolutely certain of your ground. But the other bit was, when they were certain of their ground, it was like, okay, so what does it say when gross misconduct occurs in your shareholders' agreement? And they said, we haven't got a shareholders' agreement. Right, okay, well, look, this is going to be difficult. But clearly, if he's been stealing that amount from the business, and he had, and they had all the proof, all the paperwork, you're going to have to obviously get rid of him, but you're probably going to, if you don't want to go to court, which will be very expensive, you're going to have to make him an offer. Because he knows how much money the business is making.
Yeah.
And right up to the day when they had the final meeting, and obviously they had engaged lawyers, I was advising them and saying, look, you've got to be clear, you're no longer friends. And do not use terms like a friendly term you've used, the name they used to call him or nickname. This is gone. And he needs to know. And indeed, they made an offer, and that was it. But I think, a key thing here is know what the rules are that you're all playing by, because success is really interesting here. Is that, I'm sure you know this, Fiona, but success causes failure often more than failure.
Yeah.
I mean, because it puts people into a situation where suddenly there's money around and all sorts of opportunities and ideas come into their heads. And in that case I've just shared, the business was suddenly having to pay out a huge amount of money in order to move forward.
Yeah. I mean, in your case, you're working with your brother. When there's disputes and you've got one member of the family that's working in a business, perhaps more than the other, that in itself can bring a whole range of problems, can't it, in terms of things like shareholder rights and who inherits the business, when you're passing it on to the next generation. Yeah,
and you're right. And you want to have the rules very clear. But I think at the same time, we're in the business of education. We're trying to change something that we passionately believe in the way that young people can, or anybody can, learn. And the need to be flexible, the need to give before you take, for me, is really, really important. And there was a couple of examples right at the beginning. Paul hadn't really been paid anything to develop the first product, and I hadn't been paid anything to do the R&D work or bring the idea to Paul. And we calculated it was something like £250,000 that the business owed us. And we agreed on the shareholding split, and all of that was fine. But we had this £250,000. This is what we were owed. And so we could carry this in the accounts that we would always be paid this. But we just both agreed, look, shall we just agree that we will just accept to lose that? And it was such a good decision because, as other people join or more shareholders, oh, by the way, we're owed 250,000, it kind of sets the wrong precedent. But also we have this, I think, as often hear people, when you read the media, this fascination with money. And it's like, look, if you do all the hard work, if you really do something that's purposeful and you work with people you like working with, life doesn't get much better as long as you can pay yourself. Genuinely, when you've actually got some money, once you're being paid more than 70,000 a year, if you're lucky to get that to that point or earning that, you're not any happier having money. And I think giving more than giving first is really important. And it's supporting each other without seeking to get what you want. Means that everyone supports each other and you have a much stronger and tighter team.
Do you think it's easier to make decisions like that, though, because you are family? Do you think it'd be different if you were working with someone who was an outsider as a business partner?
Whoever works, all the people who rather work within the SimVenture team, we've chosen really carefully. We need to know that the values they hold reflect how we are. I think it's interesting because when you're on the inside, you don't see this as family because we're kind of at the heart of the storm. But whenever we've had to make tough decisions as directors or when it was just Paul and my brother and myself, it's always a value-driven decision. It's about what's the right thing to do here and what's the right thing by people, not what's the right thing by money. Now, often if you're having to save a business, and, COVID was one example. And, both my brother and myself have volunteered straight away, said, look, we'll cut our salaries. If necessary, we won't be paid. And both of us have done it more than once. Because the vision is much more important than, rather than sort of saying, well, we'll get rid of 3 people because obviously we need to be paid. And I think it's something I'd always say to everybody, every founder, put yourself last, particularly in the early days, and then it will work for you. Don't do it the other way around.
Yeah. So in your experience, where do business partnerships go wrong?
Business partnerships go wrong when people are in too much of a rush to get things started or done. Business partnerships go wrong when people aren't honest with one another and don't ask sufficiently deep questions. And I think business partnerships go wrong sometimes, and for no fault of their own. Circumstances change, environment changes, people's health changes. That doesn't mean it goes wrong. It just means maybe we can't carry on anymore because they can't work. But I think the sort of the dishonest piece, where someone genuinely feels completely let down by another individual, when trust is broken, and it's such a delicate thing, trust. And I've done quite a lot of study into this subject. When trust is broken, it's so hard to get it back. And what founders need to be doing all the time is, look, trust is always under attack, especially if you work separately, because misunderstanding creeps in everywhere. And so it's like, look, we need to be to be really on point with each other, so that if trust is threatened, we're able to build it or protect it, because nothing motivates people more like being trusted. I think that's a Simpsons quote, actually.
Always love a Simpsons quote.
What's the key to motivation? Trust. So we don't have this process of checking in on each other and what have you done today and can you tell me and all those things. People just get on with it, and we know what the goal is, and people really enjoy that kind of environment.
Yeah. So a kind of related question to that is, what are the pitfalls and the potential downsides of working in a partnership as opposed to starting a business on your own? Obviously,
if there's 2 of you and you're split 50-50, that means you're sharing straight away sort of the proceeds, so to speak. But also any decision that you want to make, you've got to have to run it past and persuade and influence the other person that this is what you want to happen. And I think particularly in the early stages, having bootstrapped a number of businesses on my own, you realise, this is what we're going to do. And then in 2 years' time or 12 months' time or whatever it is, you go, hang on a minute, got to change, got to pivot. Now, when you're working with one other person or two other people, you've got to make sure that they're in on that change. They may disagree with you, even though for you, what you see is so obvious. And I think the other side of things is, personalities often get very worried about, I've got to tell someone bad news. And so the antidote to that is don't tell them, and they hope it goes away. And I've been guilty of that myself. But but if you're working on your own, you don't have to tell anyone. It's just you. And I think when you're young and in partnership, it genuinely is a skill to have difficult conversations. It's not something we become naturally equipped with. And as far as I know, I haven't yet seen an apprenticeship or degree which is how to have a difficult conversation. But it's a really important thing to do. And generally speaking, when you're younger, you don't have them, or you don't realise you have to have them. But when you're working in partnership, that's much more likely to occur than if you're founding something on your own.
Yeah. So if someone was thinking of going into a partnership, what 3 pieces of advice would you give them to help them on their way?
Okay, so number 1 is sit down and map out your values. Where are the shared values? Where are the values that may be different? It doesn't matter if they may be different, but make sure you understand them. So if someone says, honesty is absolutely everything, and the other person says, well, I don't mind a little bit of flexibility on honesty, talk about it, because that is, that tiny bit of difference will be like a piece of grit later on and will really annoy you. And find out if there are any difference in values and really test it. And I think in doing that, I would get an independent person to come and ask the questions. Don't do it to each other, because you'll just find yourselves going, yes, agree, let's have a drink. Where it's much better to get someone who's going to, and even pay them to come and ask the difficult questions. I think the second thing is it's important to be vulnerable with each other and show the cracks in your own armour, what you're not good at, what you're not skilled at, what you're going to need help with. Don't try and be this invincible, person, which you think, all entrepreneurs are. They're not. We're all insecure. We've all got problems. We all suffer from imposter syndrome. Talk about it. So that's the second thing. And then the third one, though, is the real positive one, is show your commitment. How committed are you to this? Go through some scenarios. If this happened, what would you do? And if someone says, well, let's be honest with you, at the first sign of a problem, I'm out of here, that's good to know. It's really good to know. And also when it does happen, you can go back and say, look, we had that conversation and you said X.
Yeah.
So they're my 3 pieces of advice.
Fantastic. Before we let you go, Peter, can you tell listeners where they can find you and SimVenture online to connect with you, please?
Okay, thank you. So SimVenture is www.simventure.com. If you want to get in touch with me, the social media probably best is LinkedIn. So Peter Harrington on LinkedIn. I'm CEO of SimVenture. If you're listening to this in the first instance, just send me a message on LinkedIn and say you heard this and ask me the question you've got. I would prefer if you don't join the ranks of the masses and try and sell me something on LinkedIn, because I get a lot of that. But if you've got a genuine inquiry or just want to build on something I've said on this podcast, do connect on LinkedIn. That would be great.
Perfect. That's fantastic. Thanks for talking to us today, Peter. It's really interesting.
Thanks, Fiona.
Cheers.
It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Working in a partnership with a friend or family member is surprisingly common, but like any business, there are benefits and pitfalls that you need to consider carefully. Peter shared some great tips here on how to make a business partnership work and how you can navigate the inevitable differences of opinion that come along. We'll include further advice and resources on starting and running a partnership, as well as links to Peter and SimVenture in the summary notes, and you'll find these at www.startyourownbusinesspodcast.co.uk. You can also learn more about the sponsor of this episode, Sage, and how Copilot can help you and your small business. If you've enjoyed the show, please hit follow. That way you'll be notified about new episodes as soon as they drop. All that remains is for me to thank Peter once again for taking his time to talk to us today. Until next time, all the best.